She mistook a Mafia boss for the electrician changing bulbs. But that mistake changed everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was just another ordinary day for Sarah. She had her head down, focused on the task at hand. The sun was already setting, casting a warm glow through the windows of her small apartment in the city. The light flickered and dimmed as the overhead bulb started to go out. With a sigh, she grabbed the step ladder and went to fix it. She was tired, stressed, and had too much on her plate. Her phone buzzed on the counter, another reminder of bills she couldn't pay. But Sarah had always been independent, and she wasn't about to let her circumstances drag her down. As she climbed the ladder and began to unscrew the old bulb, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Sarah looked down at the door. It was the maintenance guy. At least, that's what she thought. She opened the door to find a man in a plain work shirt and jeans, holding a tool bag. "Hey, I'm here to fix the light," he said, his voice deep and calm. Sarah nodded and stepped aside, assuming he was the building's electrician. She led him to the living room where the light was flickering, and without a second thought, she handed him the ladder. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," she said, a tired smile on her face. The man gave her a small, knowing grin. He wasn't in a rush, moving calmly as he started to change the bulb. He didn't seem to mind that Sarah was fidgeting nervously nearby. His calm presence made her feel a little more at ease, even though she had no idea who he was. He didn't say much, just focused on his work. Sarah glanced at him a few times, noticing his strong build and sharp features. Something about him seemed off, but she couldn't quite place it. She was too distracted by her own thoughts to pay much attention to the man in front of her. "There we go," he said, stepping down from the ladder. The light flickered back on, shining brightly in the room. "Thank you," Sarah said, smiling. She went to grab her purse to offer him a tip, but he raised a hand. "No need. Just doing my job," he replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. She blinked, feeling a slight unease, but shook it off. "Well, if you ever need anything, just let me know," Sarah said, waving as he left her apartment. The man nodded but didn't say much more as he stepped out, disappearing into the hallway. What Sarah didn't know, though, was that the man she had mistaken for a simple electrician was Giovanni, one of the most powerful Mafia bosses in the city. His business was dangerous, filled with secrets and shadows, and he had just come to change her light bulb for a reason she hadn't even begun to understand. Giovanni walked away from her apartment, his thoughts hidden behind his cold expression. He had seen something in Sarah, something that sparked his interest. She had no idea who he really was, but he could sense her quiet strength. This simple mistake, this brief interaction, would change both of their lives forever. Giovanni had his reasons for being in her life now, and Sarah, unbeknownst to her, was about to be pulled into a world she could never have imagined. The next few days felt like a blur for Sarah. The meeting with the man she had mistaken for an electrician kept replaying in her mind, over and over again. She had no idea why it was bothering her so much. Sure, he had been a little mysterious, but there was something more, something about the way he looked at her, almost as if he had seen right through her. But she had so many other things to worry about. Her bills were overdue, and her job at the convenience store barely covered the cost of rent and groceries. Still, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that there was something bigger at play. The way he had smiled when he left, his words were so casual, but there had been a weight behind them. She was about to shrug it off when another unexpected encounter brought him back into her life. Sarah had been working her shift at the store when she looked up and saw him standing at the counter. Giovanni, the same man who had changed her light bulb, only now, he wasn't wearing the work shirt anymore. Instead, he was dressed in a tailored suit, looking even more out of place in this rundown part of the city. Sarah froze for a moment, unsure if she was imagining things. "Can I help you?" she asked, forcing a smile. Giovanni's expression remained calm, but there was a glimmer of amusement in his eyes. "Actually, I was hoping you could help me," he said, his voice smooth, but with an underlying command that was hard to ignore. "I need to buy a few things, and I was wondering if you could recommend something." Sarah blinked, a little confused. She didn't know why he was here or why he was talking to her, but something about the way he said it made her feel like she was being watched. She hesitated for a second before nodding, leading him to the aisles. As they walked, she couldn't help but feel like she was walking through a dream, or maybe it was more like a nightmare. What was he doing here? And why was he being so nice to her? Giovanni asked a few questions about the products, but most of the time, they just walked in silence. Sarah tried her best to act normal, but inside, she was panicking. Why was he here? Did he know something about her? Had he been sent to check up on her? Was he really just an electrician? She glanced at him sideways, noticing the way he moved through the store with an effortless confidence, as if he owned the place. His presence felt intimidating, like he was always in control, even when he wasn't saying anything. When they reached the checkout counter, Giovanni placed a few items on the counter, then looked up at Sarah. "I've been thinking about our conversation the other day," he said, his tone still calm, but now with a hint of something else. "I think you're different from the people I usually meet." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. What did he mean by that? "I don't usually get involved with people like you," he continued, his eyes narrowing slightly as he observed her. "But there's something about you." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice shaking a little. Giovanni didn't answer right away. Instead, he took out a business card from his pocket and slid it across the counter. "I think you should come meet me tomorrow," he said simply. "There's a lot we need to discuss." Sarah stared at the card for a moment before picking it up. The card had the name Giovanni Rizzo and a number she didn't recognize. She wanted to ask more questions, to demand answers, but she knew better than to challenge someone like him. She had no idea what kind of man he was or what he wanted from her, but she couldn't ignore the pull she felt in her chest. There was something about him that made her want to find out more, even though every instinct in her told her to run. After Giovanni left, Sarah stood at the counter for a long time, staring at the card in her hand. Her mind raced with questions, doubts, and fears. What did Giovanni want from her? Why had he come back into her life? But one thing was clear. She was about to be pulled into a world that was beyond her understanding, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. The next day, Sarah made her decision. She couldn't just ignore him. She needed answers. She had to find out what was going on, even if it meant stepping into a world that could very well change everything. The following day, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the business card Giovanni had left her. She had kept it in her pocket all night, feeling its edges through her clothes, as if it held a secret she wasn't ready to uncover. She had barely slept, tossing and turning, her mind racing with possibilities. Should she meet him? Was she walking into a trap? But deep down, she knew she couldn't ignore him. She had to know what he wanted. So, as the sun began to rise the next morning, Sarah took a deep breath, pulled the card from her pocket, and dialed the number. The phone rang 3 times before a calm, familiar voice answered. "Sarah," Giovanni said, his voice smooth and reassuring. "I'm glad you called. I'll send someone to pick you up in an hour. Be ready." The line went dead before she could ask any questions. A sense of dread washed over her, but there was also a spark of curiosity. Who was Giovanni really? What was he involved in? And why was he interested in her? An hour later, a black SUV pulled up outside her apartment. The driver, a tall man in a dark suit, opened the door without a word. Sarah hesitated but got in, her heart pounding in her chest. The car was silent except for the low hum of the engine as it sped through the streets of the city. She couldn't help but feel like she was being taken somewhere important, yet she had no idea where. As the car turned down a narrow street, it came to a stop outside a large, modern building with glass windows that gleamed in the sunlight. Giovanni's office. The driver gestured for Sarah to follow him. "Mr. Rizzo is expecting you," he said, his tone neutral. Sarah's stomach fluttered as she stepped out of the car and followed the man into the building. The lobby was sleek and minimalist, the air thick with the scent of expensive leather and polished marble. She felt completely out of place, like she didn't belong in a world so far removed from her own. The man led her to an elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. As the elevator doors closed, Sarah felt the walls closing in around her. What was she doing here? She couldn't help but think about all the possibilities, all the things Giovanni could be involved in. Mafia, criminal enterprises. She shook her head, trying to push those thoughts away. When the elevator finally reached the top floor, the doors opened into a large office space. Giovanni was standing near the window, his back to her. He turned as she entered, a faint smile on his face. "Sarah, I'm glad you made it." He gestured for her to sit down. "Please, make yourself comfortable." Sarah hesitated for a moment before taking a seat across from him. Her nerves were on edge, but she tried to appear calm. "What is all this about, Giovanni?" she asked, her voice shaky despite her best efforts. Giovanni's smile remained, though there was a seriousness in his eyes now. "I'm sure you have questions, and I'm happy to answer them. But first, let me tell you why I asked you here." He paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "You see, Sarah, there's something different about you. You're not like the people I usually deal with." His words caught her off guard, but she didn't interrupt. "I'm not in the habit of getting involved with people like you," he continued. "But there's something about you that intrigues me. You have a fire, a drive that I can see." Sarah swallowed hard. She had no idea what he was talking about. "And what do you want from me?" she asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty in her chest. Giovanni leaned forward slightly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I need someone I can trust. Someone who won't ask too many questions. And I think you're that person." He paused again, letting his words sink in. "I can offer you a chance. A chance to change your life." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had heard that line before, from people who promised the world but delivered nothing. "What kind of chance?" she asked, her curiosity now getting the better of her. Giovanni's eyes sparkled with something unreadable. "I run a business, Sarah. A very successful business. But it's not just about money. It's about power, influence, and connections. I'm offering you a role, a place in something bigger than yourself." Sarah's mind raced. Power, influence. Was he serious? She had no experience in anything like that. She was just a regular girl, struggling to get by. "I don't know what you're asking," she said, shaking her head. "I can't just walk into something like that." Giovanni stood up, walking around the desk to stand in front of her. "You can," he said softly, "and I'll help you. But first, you have to trust me." His words were like a command, but there was an unmistakable sincerity behind them. "I can't promise you it will be easy," he continued, his voice low. "But if you're willing to take the chance, I'll make sure you never have to worry about anything again." Sarah felt a wave of emotions crash over her. Fear, excitement, confusion. What was she supposed to do? She had no idea what kind of man Giovanni really was, but something in her told her that this was an opportunity she couldn't pass up. She took a deep breath, her mind made up. "All right," she said, her voice firm. "I'll do it. I'll trust you." Giovanni smiled, a genuine smile this time. "Good," he said, holding out his hand. "Welcome to my world, Sarah." The days that followed were a whirlwind for Sarah. Giovanni had made her an offer she couldn't ignore, and though her nerves were on edge, she knew she had to dive into this new world head first. The office, the high-rise building, the polished furniture, it all felt so distant from the life she knew. But as she sat in the meeting room with Giovanni the next day, listening to him explain his business and the role he envisioned for her, something inside her shifted. "You're not like everyone else, Sarah," Giovanni said as they sat across from each other. "I can see that. You have potential." His words, calm and confident, somehow made her feel like she belonged, even though everything around her screamed that she didn't. The role he offered wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. Giovanni needed someone to manage the smaller, day-to-day operations of his network of businesses. Nothing too flashy, just the essential tasks that kept everything running smoothly. Sarah was uncertain at first. She had no experience in high-level business management, no formal education in anything beyond basic customer service. But Giovanni had faith in her. He trusted her judgment, and he promised to guide her every step of the way. "Don't worry about the details, Sarah," Giovanni said, as if reading her mind. "You'll learn. And when you do, you'll have a chance to rise up. I'll make sure of it." That was the moment Sarah knew she was in deeper than she ever imagined. She had stepped into a world full of power, wealth, and danger. But at the same time, Giovanni's confidence in her was undeniable. It felt strange, but empowering, like a part of her was awakening. Over the next few weeks, Sarah threw herself into her new role. She was tasked with managing contacts, dealing with logistics, and ensuring that Giovanni's operations ran smoothly. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was steady, and slowly, she began to understand the mechanics of his business. Giovanni made sure she had everything she needed, providing her with resources and support. He was demanding, but also encouraging. She couldn't help but notice how often their conversations turned personal. Giovanni had a way of opening up in the most unexpected ways. At first, she thought he was just being polite, trying to keep things professional. But then, during one late-night meeting, the walls came down. "You know," Giovanni said, leaning back in his chair, "most people don't understand what it takes to run something like this. They think it's all about money, but it's about control. It's about knowing who to trust and when to act." Sarah sat across from him, watching as he spoke. There was a darkness in his eyes, something that hinted at a past she wasn't sure she wanted to know about. Yet, she couldn't look away. "I've made mistakes, Sarah," Giovanni continued, his voice lower now. "Big ones. I've hurt people. And sometimes I wonder if it was all worth it." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had heard the rumors about Giovanni, about his criminal empire and the way he ran things. But hearing him speak so openly about it left her stunned. Was this the man she was working for? The Mafia boss, the powerful figure whose name people feared? Giovanni met her gaze, and for a moment, the world outside the room seemed to fade away. "But then I meet people like you," he said, his tone softer now. "You make me think that maybe there's another way. Maybe I can change." The vulnerability in his voice was unexpected. Sarah didn't know how to respond. She had always seen Giovanni as this untouchable figure, a man who ran the shadows of the city with a firm hand. But now, as she looked into his eyes, she saw a man who was torn between the life he had built and the person he wanted to be. A part of her wanted to reach out, to tell him that he didn't have to live in the past, that he could change. But another part of her was afraid of what that meant. If Giovanni truly wanted to change, it would shake the very foundations of everything he had built. And Sarah wasn't sure if she was ready for that kind of upheaval. The next few days were a blur of work, meetings, and decisions that made Sarah question how much she really knew about the world she had stepped into. Giovanni remained an enigma, offering her glimpses of his past, but never revealing too much. He would give her tasks, always with a subtle challenge in his tone, pushing her to prove herself, to rise above her doubts. It wasn't easy, but Sarah could feel herself growing. She had a new sense of purpose, a sense of power that she had never known before. She had a seat at the table now, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't just struggling to get by. She was building something bigger than herself. Giovanni's business was thriving, and so was she. But as she walked deeper into this world of wealth and influence, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. There was a storm on the horizon, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to face it. But one thing was certain, she was in this for the long haul, and she wasn't going to back down now. As weeks passed, Sarah settled more into her role, and with each passing day, she began to understand the intricate web Giovanni had woven around his empire. What had started as a simple task of handling logistics and small operations had slowly transformed into something bigger. She was involved in meetings with powerful individuals, people who spoke in hushed tones, their business dealings wrapped in layers of secrecy. Giovanni trusted her now, more than ever, and his faith in her had become a driving force in her life. Yet, the deeper she got, the more uneasy she became. There were moments when she would catch a glimpse of Giovanni in a way she hadn't before, a man who was trying to reconcile the life he had built with the person he longed to be. He had told her about his past, about the mistakes, the regrets, and the toll it had taken on him. But it wasn't just his words that troubled her. It was the way he acted, the way he carried the weight of his past with him, even in the smallest gestures. One evening, after a long day at work, Sarah sat in her office, going through some paperwork. The lights were dim, and the city skyline outside her window shimmered in the distance. She had learned to embrace this life, but the more she saw, the more she realized that she couldn't ignore the darkness that surrounded Giovanni's world. She had heard rumors, whispers about the people Giovanni had hurt, the lives he had ruined. And as much as she tried to convince herself that he was different, that there was more to him than just the Mafia boss, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That's when Giovanni walked into her office, interrupting her thoughts. "You're still here," he said, his voice low and quiet. His eyes scanned the room before landing on her. "I thought you'd left for the night." Sarah stood up, trying to appear calm. "Just finishing up some work," she said, offering him a small smile. Giovanni didn't return the smile. Instead, he walked over to the window, staring out at the city below. "You know, Sarah," he began, his voice distant. "Sometimes I think about the choices I've made. About the things I've done." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had heard this before, the vulnerability, the regret. It was the part of Giovanni that no one saw, the side of him he kept hidden from the world. "I didn't plan for any of this," he continued, his voice growing softer. "I didn't plan to be the person I am today. But sometimes life doesn't give you a choice." Sarah's hands trembled as she put the papers down on the desk. She had never seen Giovanni like this before. She had always known him as the confident, powerful man who seemed to have everything under control. But now, he seemed broken, uncertain, as if the weight of his decisions was finally catching up to him. "Giovanni," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you don't have to carry this burden alone." Giovanni turned to face her, his eyes locking with hers. For a moment, there was silence between them, a tension that neither of them could ignore. "I don't know if I can change, Sarah," he admitted. "But I want to try. I want to be more than this." Sarah didn't know what to say. She had always seen Giovanni as a man of power, a man who didn't need anyone. But now, standing before her, he was someone else entirely. Someone vulnerable, someone who needed her just as much as she needed him. She took a deep breath and stepped toward him. "You don't have to change all at once," she said gently. "We can take it one step at a time. You don't have to do it alone." Giovanni's gaze softened, and for the first time since Sarah had met him, she saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. He reached out, taking her hand in his. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You're the only person who's ever believed in me." Sarah's heart fluttered in her chest. She wasn't sure where this path would lead, but she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't turn back now. Her life had become intertwined with Giovanni's, and no matter how dangerous or uncertain the future seemed, she couldn't walk away. As the days went by, Sarah and Giovanni grew closer, and their connection deepened. They shared more moments like that, where Giovanni opened up to her, showing her the parts of himself he kept hidden. It wasn't always easy. There were times when the darkness in his past seemed to consume him, times when he would pull away, afraid of dragging her down with him. But Sarah was determined to be there for him, to show him that he could change, that he could have a life beyond the shadows. One evening, as Sarah was leaving the office, Giovanni stopped her in the hallway. "I'm ready to take the next step," he said, his voice filled with determination. "I want to move away from this life, Sarah. I want to build something with you. Something real." Sarah's heart soared. She had always known there was more to Giovanni than the man he had been. But hearing him say those words made everything feel possible. "Then let's do it," she said, smiling. Together. Weeks went by, and Giovanni's words began to take root in Sarah's mind. He was truly committed to leaving behind the life that had defined him for so long. It wasn't an easy decision for him, but every day, Sarah could see the weight lifting off his shoulders, even if just a little. Their relationship had evolved in ways neither of them expected. What started as a professional arrangement had turned into something far more personal, and as their bond grew, so did the stakes. Giovanni had always been a man of power and secrecy, but now, he was opening up to Sarah in ways that left her both in awe and cautious. She had seen glimpses of the dark side of his world, the threats, the manipulations, the dangerous games he had played. But now, Giovanni was determined to change. He had even started working on dismantling parts of his empire, turning over operations to trusted associates, and cutting ties with the people who had once been his closest allies. Sarah supported him through every decision, every challenge, but there were moments when fear crept in. Would they ever truly escape the reach of his past? Could Giovanni, the Mafia boss, really start over? One night, after a long day of strategizing their next steps, Giovanni and Sarah sat in his penthouse, the city lights sparkling below. The room was quiet, save for the sound of the occasional car passing by. Giovanni looked at Sarah, a serious expression on his face. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice low. "I want to make it official. I want you to be more than just my business partner. I want us to be a team, in every sense." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She had felt the connection between them growing stronger, but hearing him say those words out loud made everything feel real. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice steady despite the flutter of excitement in her chest. Giovanni leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "I mean, I want us to build something together," he said. "Not just the business, but a life. A future. I'm ready for it, Sarah. But I need you with me. I need you to trust me completely. Sarah felt a surge of emotion wash over her. She had never imagined herself in this world of power, danger, and wealth. But with Giovanni, it felt different. He wasn't the man he had once been. He was a man who wanted to make amends, to find redemption. She had been by his side through so much, and in that moment, she realized she was ready for whatever came next. I trust you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Giovanni reached for her hand, his grip firm but gentle. Then let's do this, he said. Let's build something real. Together. As they sat there, hand in hand, a sense of calm settled over Sarah. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had found her place in the world. But just as quickly as the calm had come, a knock at the door shattered the moment. Giovanni's eyes hardened, his jaw clenching. Stay here, he told Sarah, his tone sharp. She nodded, watching him walk toward the door. The moment he opened it, a man stepped inside, a man Sarah had never seen before. He was tall, well-dressed, with a cold, calculating look in his eyes. Giovanni, the man said, his voice low and gruff. We need to talk. Now. Giovanni's demeanor shifted instantly. He stood straighter, his expression hardening as he sized up the man. What is it? Giovanni asked, his voice cold. The man didn't waste any time. It's about your deal with the others, he said, his eyes flicking to Sarah before quickly returning to Giovanni. They're not happy. They want you back in, Giovanni. They're not going to let you just walk away. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She could see the tension in Giovanni's posture, the way his body stiffened as the man spoke. I've made my decision, Giovanni said, his voice unwavering. I'm done with that life. And if they don't like it, they can deal with it. The man's eyes narrowed, but he didn't argue. Instead, he turned and left, disappearing as quickly as he had come. Giovanni stood there for a moment, his back to Sarah, before turning to face her. I'm sorry you had to hear that, he said quietly. Sarah stood up, walking toward him. Is it really over? She asked, her voice tinged with worry. Giovanni met her gaze, his expression serious. Not yet, he said, his voice steady. But I'm getting closer. Sarah reached out, taking his hand once more. I'm with you, Giovanni, she said, her voice firm. We'll get through this together. Giovanni's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, Sarah saw the man he was trying to become, the man he wanted to be. And for the first time, she believed that they could leave the darkness behind and build a future together. But as they stood there, a sense of unease lingered in the air. The storm was far from over. The past wasn't ready to let Giovanni go, and neither was the world he had built. But no matter what, Sarah knew one thing. She wasn't going anywhere. They were in this fight together. The tension that had settled over the room after the conversation with the man at the door lingered for days. Giovanni had always been a man of resolve, but now there was something different in his eyes, a look of uncertainty that Sarah had never seen before. He had always been the one in control, but for the first time, she saw him faltering, caught between his past and the future he desperately wanted. Sarah tried to reassure herself that Giovanni's decision to leave his criminal life behind was final, but every day seemed to bring new challenges, new reminders that the past was not so easily erased. One night, as they sat together in the quiet of his penthouse, Giovanni broke the silence. I thought it would be easier, Sarah, he said, his voice heavy. I thought that once I made the decision, I could just walk away. But it's not that simple. Sarah glanced at him, seeing the conflict in his eyes. She knew the weight of his past was always going to be there, lurking just beneath the surface, but she also knew that he was doing everything he could to leave it behind. We knew it wouldn't be easy, she said gently, her hand resting on his. But you're trying. That's what matters. Giovanni let out a sigh, his gaze drifting to the city lights outside. I've hurt so many people, Sarah, and I don't know how to make up for that. His voice was laced with regret, and for a moment, Sarah could see the man he used to be, the one who had built his empire on power and fear. But she also saw the man he was becoming, the one who was trying to change, trying to make amends. You don't have to do it alone, Sarah said, her voice soft but firm. We'll figure it out together. Giovanni met her gaze, his expression softening. I don't deserve you, Sarah, he said quietly. You're the only good thing in my life, and I'm afraid I'll mess it up. Sarah shook her head, her heart aching for him. "You're not alone in this, Giovanni. We're in this together." The next few days were filled with meetings and phone calls as Giovanni worked to distance himself from his past. He had started cutting ties with some of the more dangerous associates in his network, but that also meant dealing with their resentment and threats. Sarah stood by him through it all, supporting him as best she could, even when the tension in the air seemed unbearable. One evening, as they sat in the office, Giovanni received another call. He didn't say much, just listened, his jaw tightening as the conversation went on. Sarah watched him, a sense of dread creeping up her spine. When he hung up the phone, he turned to her, his face pale. "It's not over," he said, his voice low. "They're not letting me go that easily. They're coming for us, Sarah." A chill ran through Sarah's veins. She had known that Giovanni's past would never let him go completely, but hearing him say it out loud made it all too real. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Giovanni stood up, walking to the window, his back to her. "I don't know yet," he said, his tone filled with frustration. "But I won't let them drag you into this, Sarah. I won't let them hurt you." Sarah stood up and walked toward him, her heart pounding. "Giovanni, I'm already in this. I don't care about the danger. I care about you. We're in this together, remember?" Giovanni turned to face her, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and gratitude. "I don't want to lose you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm scared, Sarah." For the first time, Sarah saw the raw vulnerability in him. The man who had always been the one in control, the one who never showed fear. "You're not going to lose me," she said, stepping closer to him. "We'll fight this together. I believe in you." Giovanni's eyes softened, and for a moment, the weight of the world seemed to lift from his shoulders. But that moment was short-lived. The past had caught up with them, and they both knew that things were about to get much harder. The phone rang again, and Giovanni's expression hardened. He picked up the receiver, his voice sharp as he spoke into it. "Yes, I understand. I'll take care of it." He hung up the phone, his face grim. "It's starting," he said, his voice heavy with resignation. "We need to be ready." Sarah nodded, her heart racing. She had never imagined that her life would lead her down this path, but now, as she stood beside Giovanni, she knew she couldn't turn back. No matter what came next, she was with him. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. Giovanni had made his decision, and so had she. They were in this fight together, and nothing, no threat, no danger, would tear them apart. The following days were a blur of tension and decisions. Giovanni was more distant than usual, his mind consumed by the looming threat from his past. The quiet moments they had shared were few and far between as he worked tirelessly to fortify his position. Sarah could sense the growing weight on his shoulders, the burden of a man who had spent years building an empire only to have it threatened to crumble at his feet. She knew he was trying to protect her, but she also knew that no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shield her from the storm that was coming. It was a restless night when everything shifted. Giovanni had been pacing in his office for hours, his face drawn tight with frustration. Sarah, unable to sleep, had gone to find him. When she stepped into his office, she saw him sitting at his desk, a phone in his hand. His gaze was fixed on the screen, his fingers tapping the surface nervously. "Giovanni." Sarah called softly. He looked up, startled, as if he had forgotten she was there. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then, his eyes softened. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "I didn't want you to see this side of me. I didn't want you to see how bad it really is." Sarah walked over and stood beside him, her hand gently resting on his arm. "You don't have to do this alone, Giovanni," she said, her voice steady but full of concern. "We're in this together. You don't have to protect me from everything." Giovanni exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. "I'm trying, Sarah, but every time I think I'm getting out, they pull me back in. It's never that easy. It never will be." Sarah's heart ached for him. She had seen the man he was becoming, the man who wanted to escape his past, but she also understood that his world wasn't as simple as just walking away. He had built something, and that something didn't let go easily. "What are we going to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Giovanni turned his chair to face her, his eyes locking with hers. "We fight, Sarah," he said, his voice unwavering. "We fight, and we make sure that nothing gets in the way of our future." It was a turning point for both of them. Giovanni had spent so long running from his past, trying to bury it, but now, he was standing tall, ready to face the consequences of his choices. Sarah had always believed in him, but in that moment, she realized just how much she was willing to risk to stand by his side. The next few weeks were filled with covert meetings and calculated moves. Giovanni took every precaution, always one step ahead of the people who were threatening his new life. The more Sarah saw, the more she understood the gravity of the situation. Giovanni's world was dangerous, and there was no way out without a fight. But there was something else that began to unfold as well. Giovanni wasn't the man he had once been. He wasn't just trying to protect his empire anymore. He was fighting for his redemption, for the chance to be something more than the man who had ruled the shadows for so long. One night, after a particularly tense meeting, Giovanni turned to Sarah with a look she had never seen before. There was a weight in his eyes, a rawness that made her heart tighten. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I want to make this right. All of it. I want to make up for every mistake, every wrong I've ever done." His voice was steady, but there was something vulnerable beneath the surface. Sarah's throat tightened as she met his gaze. "Giovanni, you've already changed," she said softly. "You've already shown me the man you want to be. And I believe in you. I believe in us." Giovanni's eyes softened, and for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to believe in something beyond his past. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. It was a simple moment, but it meant everything. As the days passed, Giovanni's resolve only strengthened. He wasn't just trying to protect his future with Sarah. He was building a new life, a new legacy, one that didn't involve the shadows of the past. It wasn't going to be easy, and there would be obstacles along the way, but Giovanni was finally ready to face them head-on. They were ready to fight together. And for Sarah, that was all she needed to know. One afternoon, as they sat together in Giovanni's penthouse, planning the next steps for their future, Sarah felt a calm settle over her. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid. She wasn't afraid of the danger, of the threats that still loomed on the horizon. She was ready to face whatever came next, because she knew that Giovanni was no longer the man who lived in the shadows. He was the man who had chosen to change. He was the man who had chosen her. The weeks that followed were a test of resilience, patience, and commitment. Giovanni and Sarah had managed to dismantle the most dangerous parts of his empire, but there were still threats lingering in the shadows, remnants of a life Giovanni was trying desperately to leave behind. Every day felt like a step closer to freedom, but also a step closer to danger. Giovanni's enemies hadn't given up, but neither had he. And Sarah, standing by his side, had never wavered in her belief in him. Together, they built something stronger, more solid than anything Giovanni had known in his past: trust, love, and the promise of a future without the dark hold of his former life. One evening, after a long day of strategic meetings and planning, Giovanni turned to Sarah. His eyes, once cold and calculating, were now filled with warmth, a warmth that was entirely new to him. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" he said, his voice a little softer than usual. Sarah smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Yes, we have, and we're just getting started." Giovanni took her hand in his grip firm yet gentle. "I never thought this would be possible," he admitted. "I never thought I could leave all of that behind. But you made me see that there was more to life than power and control. You showed me what really matters." Sarah felt a lump in her throat, a mix of emotions bubbling to the surface. "You've always had that inside you, Giovanni," she said. "You just needed someone to believe in you. And I've always believed in you." For a long moment, they stood there, looking at each other, as if seeing each other for the first time. The past, the mistakes, the darkness, it no longer mattered. What mattered was the here and now, and the life they were going to build together. But just as Sarah began to relax into the peace of the moment, the phone rang. Giovanni picked it up, his expression immediately hardening as he listened. Sarah could hear the tension in his voice, the sharpness that returned so quickly. "Yes, I understand," Giovanni said, his voice tight. "I'll handle it. No one touches her." He hung up the phone and turned to Sarah, his face unreadable. "That was one of my old associates," he said, his voice low. "They're not going to let me go quietly. They think they can push me back into their game, and they're threatening you." Sarah's heart raced. She had known this moment would come, the moment when Giovanni's past would catch up with them. but hearing the fear in his voice made it all too real. "Giovanni," she started, but he cut her off. "I won't let them hurt you," he said, his tone resolute. "I will handle this. I won't let anyone get in the way of our future." Sarah reached out, touching his arm. "We've been through so much already," she said, her voice steady but full of emotion. "We can face this too. Together." Giovanni met her gaze, his eyes softening. "I know," he said, "and I won't let anything take that away from us." The decision was made. Giovanni had chosen his path, and now there was no turning back. The fight wasn't over, but he was ready to face it, knowing that no matter what came next, Sarah would be by his side. The next few days were tense. Giovanni took every precaution, making sure that Sarah was safe, that their new life was secure. But the shadow of his past never fully receded. The final confrontation came in a quiet, unassuming place. A warehouse on the outskirts of town, a place where it all started, a place where the lines between the past and present would blur. Giovanni stood in the center of the room, surrounded by his old associates, his enemies, the people who had once been his allies. His gaze was unwavering, his presence commanding. But this time, there was no fear, no hesitation. He was done running. He had nothing left to prove. "I'm done," Giovanni said, his voice loud and clear, cutting through the tension in the room. "This ends now. I'm not going back. I'm not the man I used to be, and if you can't accept that, then we'll settle this once and for all." His old associates tried to push back, but Giovanni stood his ground. Sarah was waiting for him outside, and that was all that mattered now. The fight was long, but Giovanni emerged victorious. The remnants of his old life were scattered, and with each decision, he pushed further away from the darkness. When he returned to Sarah, he found her waiting for him, a quiet strength in her eyes. "It's over," Giovanni said, his voice heavy with relief. "We're free." Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. "We did it, Giovanni. Together." They stood there, in the quiet aftermath of the battle, knowing that the road ahead would be far from easy, but they would face it together. They had fought for this, fought for their love, for their future. And no matter what came next, they knew they had each other. Giovanni had found his redemption, and Sarah had found the man she knew he could be. Their future was theirs to build, a future free from the shadows of the past. This is a deeply moving and unforgettable touching story about redemption, love, and overcoming the shadows of the past. Giovanni, a mafia boss, struggles to leave his dangerous life behind, but his path to change is full of challenges. With the help of Sarah, a woman who believes in him despite his dark history, Giovanni is forced to face his past and fight for the future he wants. As they navigate the complexities of trust, fear, and hope, this touching story explores what it truly means to start over. Sarah's unwavering support helps Giovanni realize that redemption is possible, even for someone with a past as dark as his. Together, they confront the forces that threaten to tear them apart and work toward building a life free from the dangers of Giovanni's previous world. Their journey is not an easy one, but their bond grows stronger with every challenge they face. The powerful emotions and resilience displayed in this touching story remind us that no matter how difficult life may seem, love and trust can lead to a new beginning. Through every struggle, every setback, this touching story shows that true transformation comes from within. The couple's journey is a testament to the strength of love and how even the most damaged souls can find redemption. If you are a fan of touching stories filled with raw emotion, this one will leave a lasting impact. Get ready to experience a touching story of personal growth, unwavering support, and the courage to face the past for a brighter future.